And John Dean is the former White House counsel for President Richard Nixon. John, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Trump had quite a day yesterday. There was that comment about Andrew Jackson and about how the Civil War would not have happened, even though Andrew Jackson was born 16 years before the Civil War started. He corrected himself later. He also talked about what an honor it would be to meet with Kim Jong-un. He floated the idea of a gas tax, talked about breaking up banks, had a friendly phone call with President Duterte over the weekend. What do you make of all this? Is this the pressures of the White House that are causing Donald Trump to act erratically, or is it something else?
Well, it's hard to get inside his mind. We're beginning to get used to his patterns, and they're predictably unpredictable. What I find fascinating is his total ignorance on so many issues. I wonder about that call to Putin, for example, if he went through the normal protocols of actually preparing for it, having people in from the State Department, then carefully recording it. And I've thought, what in the world is the guy who's translating that call in Russia doing? Because if you've ever read a Trump transcript,
oh, I have.
You indeed have. They are doozies, and so probably tough, very tough translation. But he's all over the lot on every issue. I found a fascinating piece in the Times this morning by Charles Blow about his language level being at roughly that of a 6th to 8th grader, and probably on the slow end of that. So we've got a real problem with this president.
If you are a foreign leader, say you're an authoritarian leader, a dictator, somebody who doesn't have much regard for human rights, someone like the Filipino President Duterte, Kim Jong-un, Vladimir Putin, what do you think when Donald Trump goes out of his way to praise you? What does that mean?
Well, I think that'll depend upon the level of sophistication of the foreign leader or the foreign dictator. Putin probably is pretty well briefed on this, probably sees it for what it is, and I think he's shrewd enough to play it any way he wants to. And Trump thinks himself a tough negotiator. Well, I think he's up against a tougher one with Putin, who's proven his mettle over the years to keep the power the way he has. So I think they think he's a fool, frankly. I think most of the world leaders are wondering what in the world has happened to the United States, that somebody like Donald Trump is the president, and we're going to pay a price for it sometime, somewhere along the line of this presidency.
The White House will say that they in effect are trying to form better relationships with a number of these leaders in order to keep Americans safe, to fight terrorism. It's better to have a conversation, have a relationship, so we can band together against the bigger threats that are facing the world. Is there something to be said about trying to cultivate these leaders, trying to speak more nicely of them in order to get things done?
Well, if you look at the history of his praise for these kind of people, they're typically people who are not threatening of the United States, other than potentially North Korea, which doesn't have the capacity today, may tomorrow. But Putin isn't really directly threatening us in any way with direct harm. He's trying to get in and mess around with our system, make it look weaker. Trump's affinity to these people seems to be on a much more personal level, and his attraction to strong men. So who knows what's going on in his brain with these attractions. He
praised Saddam Hussein, said he was very good at fighting terrorists during the campaign. He also said that Gaddafi should have stayed in charge. There have been a number of times where he's done just that. He's had kind words for dictators, human rights violators, and so far he's said very little on the subject of human rights and upholding them and upholding democracy around the world.
Selecting Andrew Jackson as his historical idol, I find is bizarre. He is known in the circles, historians I visit with, as the worst of the great presidents, and he is the worst for real reasons. He literally killed a man in cold blood in a duel after he'd been shot and the other guy was unarmed. He is somebody who did a brutal removal of Native Americans from their homes. I just don't get it, where this is the kind of guy you'd want to say, he's my ideal, he's my kind of strong guy.
Yeah, he was a slave owner, slaughtered
slave owner, sure.
American Indians. John Dean, thank you very much. Always appreciate your expertise.
Thank you, Katie.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.